The house I grew up in was a gloomy, chilly, and pretty eerie place. It felt like it was always dark inside, especially during the cold winter months. And there were times when strange sounds echoed from the basement, which, I have to admit, sometimes spooked me a bit, but I'd never admit that to my mom. I thought I was too grown up to be scared by silly noises. I've been trying to act like the responsible one in the house ever since my dad left when I was 7. I never wanted to turn out like him, and I can't stand the sight of him, to be honest. So, let's just leave it at that. I lived in our home with my mom, Linda, and my uncle, Kevin. Our place was in the middle of nowhere, a tiny run-down town called Steenan, Indiana. No one really liked living there, and I didn't have any friends because I was homeschooled. I couldn't even remember seeing another kid my age in Steenan because we hardly ever left the house, except when Mom needed to buy groceries. But I was super close to Uncle Kevin. When I was little, he used to share ghost stories with me right before bedtime, and my mom would get annoyed. "Cut it out, Kev. You're going to give him nightmares." She'd scold him. Well, I did have nightmares, and sometimes it felt like they never really went away. They lingered in my mind like a spider weaving its web. The story he told most often was about a spooky monster with a twisted body and pitch-black eyes. According to legend, that's what Uncle Kevin called it, even though I knew he was just making it up. This monster would sneak into your room if you stayed up past your bedtime and hide in your closet, watching you all night. Of course, it was just a silly tale Kevin used to keep me from staying up late, but that creepy creature popped into my mind more times than I'd like to admit over the years. One night, I tried to go to bed early because I had a terrible headache. I lay down on my cold bed and pulled the covers over my head as if I could hide from whatever was causing the pain in my head. After placing my glasses on the nightstand next to my bed, I reached out and switched off the light. The darkness felt strangely captivating, making me feel strangely alive. It was like I was hypnotized by the void. As I gazed around the room, all I could see was the pitch-black darkness that surrounded me. It held my attention as if something deep within my mind was urging me to look. Yet there was nothing to see with my eyes. This was an experience reserved for the innermost recesses of my thoughts. Suddenly, I heard a scratching noise on the window above my bed. My eyes snapped open, and it felt like I couldn't close them again. What was that? I asked myself. It must be nothing. It couldn't be anything, right? Right. It was probably just my imagination playing tricks on me in the dark. But in a moment of childish curiosity, I decided to glance out the window just to confirm that it was indeed just a tree branch brushing against the glass. But then it hit me like a ton of bricks. There was no tree near my window. Still, I tried to convince myself that it was best to sleep it off and think about it in the morning. It had to be all in my head, right? I found it oddly hard to fall asleep that night, as if someone or something was determined to keep me awake. When I woke up the next morning, that strange sound was still stuck in my head. I knew it had to be coming from somewhere, but where? I had no clue. Then it hit me. The cellar. I mustered up all the courage I had and slowly descended into the dark depths. It had been ages, maybe a year or even longer since I'd been down there. I almost forgot what it looked like. All I could see were clouds of cobwebs and stacks of dusty cardboard boxes pushed against the walls. I started sifting through a few of the boxes, and I came across a childhood drawing. It was a sketch of a monstrous creature, definitely not human. This thing had barely a face, just eerie black eyes and no mouth. Its body was tall and twisted in ways I couldn't even fathom. The more I stared at the drawing, the more it reminded me of the story my uncle used to tell me. There seemed to be rain falling above the creature, and at the bottom of the paper I had scrawled, "Please stay awake," in huge letters. I didn't understand what that meant, but I folded the paper and stuffed it in my pocket. I rushed back up the stairs to the kitchen and went about my day, keeping that drawing in my thoughts, trying to figure out why I'd drawn it in the first place. I glanced outside and noticed that it had started to rain. I didn't want to dwell on that creature any longer, so I entered my dimly lit room and flopped onto my bed. I fell asleep before I knew it. I woke up and it was exactly 3:00 a.m. This night felt colder and darker than any I could remember. The rain from earlier had soaked the farm, and the full moon in the sky looked so bright. It almost seemed unreal. For a moment, I glanced out of my bedroom window and could have sworn I saw something moving swiftly through the yard. When it realized I had spotted it, it hid behind a tree, trying to stay out of sight. It looked just like the strange drawing from my childhood. I rushed into Uncle Kevin's room, shaking him awake. "Kevin, Kevin!" He rubbed his tired eyes and asked, "What's going on, buddy?" "It's really late." He seemed puzzled by my urgency. I looked him in the eyes and said softly, "I saw someone in the yard." Kevin hesitated for a moment, then replied, "You probably just saw an animal. Go back to bed." But I knew what I had seen was no animal, or at least not any animal I had ever seen before, not even in my worst nightmares. I couldn't tell him exactly what I saw, as he wouldn't believe me. "No, Kevin, it wasn't an animal. Please, it looked like a man. I think. Look, please go out and check." Uncle Kevin jumped up, grabbed his shotgun from under the bed, and said, "All right, let's go. Show me where he is, but let's be quiet and not wake your mom. I'll scare the intruder off." We went outside, and I pointed toward the tree, whispering. I saw him go behind that tree. My uncle bravely walked up to the tree and peeked around it, but there was nothing there. He searched the entire farm for more than half an hour, but he didn't find anyone or anything. "Let's go back inside, buddy. There's no one out here. Keep the doors locked tonight." He was mistaken. I was sure there was something lurking outside. I crawled back into bed and huddled under the covers. The howling wind outside pierced my ears with a sound that I thought only dogs could hear. Suddenly, I heard a tapping noise on my window. With each tap, the sound grew louder. I clutched the blankets tightly around me. The taps gradually turned into knocks, growing louder and faster, and then they escalated into banging. I feared the glass might shatter. Then, abruptly, it all stopped. No more taps, no more knocks, no more banging, and the wind fell silent. I breathed a sigh of relief. But my relief was short-lived. I heard a low, bone-chilling voice right next to my ear. "Please, stay awake." It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. I rushed into the hallway, planning to reach my mother's room, but then I saw it. Whatever it was, I still can't explain. It was cradling my lifeless Uncle Kevin, his body mangled and carved with the words, "Please stay awake." I tried to scream, but all that came out was silence. I sprinted to my mother's bedroom and found her lifeless body in the middle of the floor, covered in blood with her left arm torn from its socket. The words, "Please stay awake," were written next to her in her own blood. I couldn't hold back the tears, and when I turned around, the creature had vanished. I didn't know where it had gone, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. I squeezed my eyes shut and let out the loudest scream I could muster. I called the police and lay down on the cold, now blood-soaked floor, waiting for their arrival. It felt like hours. At last, the police arrived and found me curled up beside my mother's lifeless body. I spilled out every detail, showed them my drawing, and described the taps, knocks, and bangs. I even told them about the figure I had seen outside. But, of course, they couldn't believe a word of it. Why would they? All they saw was a scared, lonely kid standing over his dead mother, her blood staining my clothes as much as it stained the floor. Now I find myself in this cold, dark, and desolate cell. The only solace I have is the uninterrupted silence. It's always there, a peaceful companion. Tonight it's raining outside and it feels even colder, darker, and wetter than before. Unfortunately, I have to stop writing now because I just heard a tap on my window.